If I hate, that serves no purpose. I could also see the difficulty ahead of me if I was going to follow this path. Everything changes and nothing is permanent. We will die. So many people would tell you without being asked what you should do. And when I was younger, I didn't have confidence to tell them to bugger off. But now I do. Now no more of the times that were difficult. This time has now ended.
Don't Be Caught Dead, the show bringing stories of death back to life. Here's your host, Catherine Ashton.
Annie, thank you so much for joining us today.
It's great to be here. Thank you for asking me, Catherine.
Now, Annie, you're no stranger to death, and your experience, obviously, in your profession has been wide and varied, but you have quite the personal story from what I understand as well. Would you feel comfortable sharing a little bit of that story with us?
Oh, of course. So when you say a personal story, a bit about my background and leading up to where I am now?
Yeah, and then we can talk about your professional roles as well.
Sure. As a child, I was in a foster home for a couple of years as a little baby. So my sister wasn't, due to certain circumstances. Unfortunately, I was the one that had to go. So when I eventually came home, the first foster home was not good. And even though I was a baby, I remember certain things was not good. Then I was moved to another place which was better because they had toys and they had another child there so I could play. Previously they had none of that. Then I got scarlet fever. I had to go to Austin Hospital into the infectious diseases. So I was also in isolation again for a few more weeks. I came out of that and then I got measles. I had to go back into isolation. By the time I got home, I was a very confused little girl. And then I was introduced to my sister that I didn't even know that I had. And it caused, I had just come from a situation where I had not felt love and I had felt great insecurity.
And what age, Annie, were you when you met your sister for the first time?
I was about 3.5.
Wow.
So, they had toys there and I wanted the toys. And I think there probably was some feelings of guilt and being uncomfortable that my mother had to do this. And she had to do this. I understood that. She had no choice in those days. And my sister was always told, give Annie the toys, give Annie the toys. And I think that caused a bit of a rift between my sister and myself. So that was some of the background. Then I was married at 17. I left school at 14. I had 6 miscarriages. I was sterilized when I was 21. I had a oophorectomy, hysterectomy when I was 28. And in that time, I had been married a few times. And one husband died when he was, we'd been married for 6 months. He was in a car accident and he was killed. I had to go to the morgue to identify him. And then a fiance had taken his life when I was having my hysterectomy, oophorectomy. So these experiences, I say that they've broken my heart open. And rather than contracting, I have opened more. This is how it feels to me. I was a youth worker for many years. I worked with quadriplegics for many years. I was a practice manager for 15 years in medical centres. I've seen and I've experienced suffering and joy, and I always sort of lean towards the suffering aspect of it. And I wonder if that was because of my background. Sometimes we can't always explain why we are drawn to a particular experience.
And turn that experience as well, like from so much heartache and trauma to, I suppose, use that and the way in which you have, and it seems to have, channeled it in a more positive manner than perhaps some other people have.
Yes, and I don't know why I was fortunate to be able to do that. And I continue to learn. So the people that I'm with at end of life, and they're people, so I don't call them clients, because they're not clients to me, they're my teachers. Every time I meet another person, it's an opportunity for me to smooth any ragged edges down, and I would be kidding myself if I didn't think that I had them. So probably 4.5, maybe 5 years ago now, Sarah Krasnostein came to my place and we had a talk, and a wonderful talk. Went on for about like 4 or 5 hours. And this was for an article for The Australian. And after we had spoken, Sarah rang me up a couple of weeks later and she said, look, I'm writing this book, The Believer. And previously, her first book was The Trauma Cleaner, which was an amazing book.
Yeah, it really is, isn't it?
You read it?
I have, and she was actually a local Frankston woman, so it's very close to here.
Yes. I mean, I'd read it. So, oh my gosh.
And we're just referring to Sandra Pankhurst and her life story that
Yes.
that Sarah wrote about in Trauma Cleaner.
Yes, thank you. So a couple of weeks later, she rang me up and she said, look, I'm writing this book. Would you be interested in being a part of it? It's a story about 6 different people, and it's called The Believer because it's about, why do people believe what they believe, and how did they get to that point, and what were their challenges, and how do they benefit others? And I said, oh, that sounds wonderful, and I'm really honored. And then I said, I've just got to ask someone if it's okay, because I need to be able to speak my truth. So then I contacted my ex-husband, and we had a very violent marriage, and there was definitely domestic violence. And I said to him, but he's the father of my 2 boys, and everything is fine now. We're talking many decades ago now. And I said, I've been asked to tell my story and to be for a book. And I said, I'm just ringing you up because I need to understand if it's okay with you that I can be honest. Bless him, he said, it's okay. Now, when he said it's okay, I'm thinking, I'm so grateful. And then I thought, oh, is this because maybe you've forgotten what you did? But either way.
Yes. Yep. I think it's amazing that you even asked.
Look, I had to, because, I had to be able to speak my truth to Sarah. And there was a lot of very sensitive material. And I think, some of it's been censored, some of it hasn't been. So then it took a couple of years. Sarah would come round in between. She'd keep going back to America, interviewing people here, coming to me. I was with a woman who was facing end of life. I was her death doula. And Sarah had said that if any of the people that I'm with, if she would be able to accompany me. So the other people, they all said, no, I don't feel comfortable. No problem. Totally respect that. And then I met this woman who had breast cancer. And I mentioned to her if Sarah could come. And she said, absolutely, bring her. She said, and she was a bit like me. I want it out there. I want to be able to speak my truth. And she was spectacular. So Sarah and I would go round to this lady. And then with her, while she was going through her pathway of joy and suffering, and her family. And when she had died, I had got pneumonia, so I couldn't be with her. But I had organized previously a funeral director who had a cooling plate. And anyway, that's a whole nother story. So being able to, it was so uplifting for me to not have to worry about, oh, can I say this? Is this appropriate? Whatever Sarah asked me, I told her the truth, my truth. Now, we all know that truth can vary according to the person. So what I see as my truth, another person may see it as not, because it doesn't correspond with their truth. But anyway, I was very honoured to have been part of that, and also to have been able to open up. Sarah was a great listener, and she didn't just ask me questions. She shared also a lot about her own life and about her thoughts and her opinions. And I think this is why I was able to connect with her. So if I was to just have someone ask me questions and they weren't going to get into it with me,
Yeah.
then it's just one-sided.
Yeah, especially about that very in-depth process of writing a book. Like, as you said, it was over a very long period of time. So
Yeah.
it's something that you have to share, isn't it?
Yeah. So that was one great honour that I've had in my life.
And Annie, just talking about that process that you went through, was the seeking of permission from your ex-husband, was that the thing that was the pivotal point where you go, okay, yep, I'm going to share all? Because were you really seeking permission from him, or were you seeking permission really for yourself at that stage?
Really from him. I was okay because I got quite excited and I'm thinking, yes, I'm ready for this. And all my life I've little tidbits I've released little things about me, but I've never been able to be brutally honest and
Mm.
vulnerable. So I think it was because he gave me the permission that I knew that I wasn't going to offend anyone by my actions. That was really important.
And has that made your storytelling and your role in what you do easier since you've actually had that opportunity to tell your story in its entirety?
That's a good question, Catherine. I never even thought of that. But yes, I think it did. I think it broke the dam.
Yeah, yeah. And at what stage were you when you were approached by Sarah in relation to your, for want of a better word, journey into Buddhism? I know that you've always had meditation as part of a focus for yourself, but at what point did you convert to Buddhism, and what attracted you to that faith?
Well, it was over 40 years ago, probably 45 years ago now, when I converted, when I actually decided that this was the pathway that intrigued me. I read this book. It was by Ramdas. It was called Grist for the Mill. And it was in the 70s. And I read it. And it was like reading something that I would not have written, but I understood what they were saying. And I could see the logic in it. And I could also see the difficulty ahead of me if I was going to follow this path. And I do like a challenge, I will admit. And so I started reading about Buddhism, reading and reading and reading and going to teachings and going to courses. And one of the things that I loved about Buddhism, I say that it takes no prisoners. My study, I lean towards Tibetan Buddhism, the Vajrayana. So in Buddhism, there's the Theravadan, there's the Mahayana, and then there's the Vajrayana. And it's all interconnected anyway. There's the same teachings, but because due to cultural differences, they practice a bit differently to other countries.
Mhm.
And one of my biggest teachings was that I learned that death is one of Buddhism's greatest teachers, because death is about impermanence, and it's about accepting that we are not creatures, that we will die. Every sentient being, every living creature will die. And in Buddhism, it goes further. So the mountains will wear down, the rivers will run dry, the sky will change, the trees will grow and they will die. Everything changes and nothing is permanent. So this was a fascinating concept to me, and I delved into it. As I delved into it, I became more and more intrigued by the aspect of death, the dying and the death. And in Buddhism, in particular, the Vajrayana, they have these beautiful death meditations. So I started doing that and realizing that how it was benefiting my day-to-day life. It helped me to look at life in a different way. So regarding mindfulness practice, it's an opportunity for me. I learned that I could actually see my confusion, recognize that this was inappropriate. I may not be able to do anything about it, but I can see you. And okay, I'll park you for a little bit, but you haven't gone anywhere and I'm going to address you. So I'll give you an example. Perhaps if I had a feeling of animosity towards a person or anything, a political party or an American president,
Just for example.
just for example, and how do I deal with that? Because if I hate, that serves no purpose. In fact, all that does is it hinders my growth. So I had to start to learn to create a space between my judgment, my preconceived biases, and the actual reality. What is reality? So a lot of the things I was looking at things and I was coloring it with my own reality, just as everyone else is. Well, that's not reality, is it? But in Buddhism, I mean, and probably many other traditions also, took me to that reality, which made a lot of sense to me.
Oh, thank you for explaining that, Annie. I really appreciate that. And how do you think that the role that Buddhism has played in your role as a death doula? Sort of how did the role as a death doula come along? You mentioned, 45 years ago you were attracted and started your journey with Buddhism. When did being a death doula come into play? I understand that you ran your own business for a period of time.
Yes. I ran a business called Anjian Australia, and I was a designer. We were importers, exporters, wholesalers, and we sold around the world. And I designed products that represented positive symbolism from all world cultures and faith traditions. And obviously, death was one of those things that I focused on. So I had a magnificent creative platform that I could actually design these products and write what I thought was meaningful text and attach it to every product so that people would also understand a bit more about it. Hopefully, maybe learn a little thing as well.
Yeah.
So when I sold the business was on the 10th of the 10th, 2010 at 10 a.m.
Oh, really? My goodness.
The man who bought it, that's what he wanted.
Really?
Yeah. So I decided. So just before I sold, I had decided. I had it up for sale, and I knew that I had to change. I had to change my life because my business. Gosh, I mean, anyone who runs their own business knows that that's 24/7. And so, what am I going to get into that I can bring my passion? And I thought I'm going to become a funeral celebrant. So then I went and I got my qualifications to be a funeral celebrant. I didn't worry about the marriage. That didn't do anything for me, probably because of my failed marriages. I just didn't have it anyway. Anyway, I decided to become a funeral celebrant, started doing funerals, and I was very honored. It was beautiful, and I loved doing the funerals, but I wanted to get closer to people at end of life. Now, at this stage, I had been with my grandfather who had died at home. I was in bed with him. My mother was on his left side. I was on his right side. My 8-year-old son was sitting in a chair by his bed, and Grandpa was dying. He had chosen to fast to death. He had renal failure. He did not want to go to hospital. He was a medic in the army. He knew what he would be up for. And so he died. And it was beautiful that my son, he actually wanted to be there. So, and I let him stay there. And many other people had died because of the miscarriages, and people wouldn't talk about the miscarriage. You know, I lost my babies between 10 and 12 weeks, and it was never discussed. So I just had to carry that as though it was almost felt like a shame that I couldn't keep a baby in my womb. You know, I kept losing them. But I also know that was due to the domestic violence. Then I had to study. And I studied with Denise Love, Life Options. I did all of her courses, and the death of a baby, and all the other ones. And then Dr. Michael Barbato, a palliative care physician in the Blue Mountains. I studied with him. I studied with Christine Longacre from America. She came down and did an intensive. I did that with her. Rick Hansen, I did an intensive course with him, not on death, but on neurobiology. And I also studied with Zenith Virago, all of hers. And then I thought, okay, you know, I'm feeling a bit confident, and I started going out and seeing people, but I was always talking about it anyway. And that's when I started to become a death doula. So I've been doing that for about 14 years now. And through Denise Love, Life Options, she asked me to be a facilitator for her courses online as a death doula. So I've done that for a couple of years, then as a pet death doula, and I've done that for a couple of years. So I was very honoured that she trusted me to be able to do that.
And tell me about that, a pet death doula.
I think people with pets, and I can see your little pussycat behind you, lovely little black and white one.
Yes,
Boy or
he
girl?
is there. Boy.
What's his
Yes, very bandit, very spoilt.
Bandit. Well, I've had many animals. I was a vet nurse. Several years ago, my greyhound was run over in front of me out the front of my house, and that just knocked me for a six. I mean, she was so excited. She was going to go with the walk next door with our neighbour, who every night would take her and her two dogs for a walk. And for some reason, Karma did something that she doesn't normally do. Just before I had the lead on her, she ran down the front, and a big SUV was charging down the street. She was killed instantly. So there was a regret, and I'm saying guilt, but I knew that I had done everything possible. It was a fluke that this happened. Then I started fostering and adopting seriously disabled animals, and that's what I have right now. So I've had up to 6 at a time, because we're all sentient beings. So in Buddhism, an ant, a slug, a little microbe, to the great big elephant are all worthy of my compassion and my attention, so that they can live a good life as much as possible. And also, we're not good with when someone's pet, when their companion animal has died. Some are great, but usually not so good. And people don't feel comfortable explaining that my cat or my dog or my fish or my bird has died, because they're not confident that they will be given the compassion that they so deserve. And that's usually kept very quiet. So as a pet death doula, encouraging people to speak openly about it, bring it out into the open, death literacy for animals as well, for humans and for animals.
Because I think that that's something that a lot of people do hold within them, is that grief associated when a companion animal does die. I know a nearby neighbour that has had terrible experience with, people just not understanding how much she is grieving and really understanding that it was as significant to her as a family member,
Yeah.
anyone, human or non-human. So,
Well, on Compass, on this Sunday, the 7th of March, they're doing a special edition about the death of an animal.
oh, fantastic! What we'll do is we'll put a link in the
Yeah,
show notes so
great.
people can look at it.
Good. I only found that I always read my age really late because I've got so many things to read, but then I found that this morning.
Oh, that's great to know. Thanks for letting me know, Annie. So tell me a little bit about Social Health Australia and how you started working with them. Originally, I believe you were an associate director and then you decided to move to a team leader's role. Tell me about that aspect.
Sure. Well, first of all, I'm not a committee girl. And when I was asked to be on the committee, I was very honoured. I thought this is great. And I've always said before that I would never do another committee, but I did it. But okay, then I had to back off because I'm just not that kind of a person. I need to be in the front line.
Yeah.
So then I
Well, you
became,
know what your skills are.
yes, that's right. And I know what I'm comfortable doing. Yeah. And I
Mm,
know what I'm uncomfortable doing.
yeah, totally.
It was about 4.5 years ago. Social Health Australia was under another name then. We started getting some funding and we were training volunteers to be with people in the community at risk of existential and social isolation. And then last year and this year, we were focusing more on loneliness in the community, existential and social isolation. And then we moved to voluntary assisted dying. Then we incorporated bereavement support. And so myself and Joe and other people were training our valuable, precious volunteers. And one of the main things, and I call it shut upness, to practice shut up and listen. We're not going to go into anyone's place and tell them, you should do this, or I know what would be good here. No, we are with that person in whatever state they're in. If they want to cry, if they want to be angry, if they want to be, sad, we will be with them. Because I think that we come from perhaps a world, perhaps a society where we are not heard. And I must admit, that was one thing that was a big thing that I also learned from my family. Bless them. They were not good listeners and were not good listeners. So if I wanted to say something, I either had to shout above everyone else or keep quiet. And a lot of the time I just kept quiet. And then that keeping quiet became part of me because so many people interrupted. So many people would tell you without being asked what you should do. And when I was younger, I didn't have the skill set or the confidence to tell them to bugger off. But now I do. But a lot of people, they're very polite, and because it's so normal that they just go along with it. And then I hear about it afterward. Oh, this person said, do this and you should do that. Especially when someone has been diagnosed with a terminal illness. Not all, but many of the people who seem to know what's right for them come around and they tell them all the things that they should do ad nauseum. And then the person will confide in me that this is really hard. People are telling me to do this and do that. And I've seen a lot of ways that it can go pear-shaped. And so then I would bring up the difficult conversations. And sometimes it can be a bit confronting. So it's really important the way So now we were talking about team leader. Now I'm talking as a death doula. So I'm deliberately trying to confuse you and your listeners.
No, no, your approach is perfectly fine. I think it's an indication of how your manner is, regardless of what hat you're wearing, Annie. And I find that interesting when you're talking about people who, when they're diagnosed with a terminal illness, other people feel the need to fill that quiet space. Do you find that that's because they may be anxious and not sure what to say?
Yes, absolutely. They don't know what to say, or perhaps they think they do know what to say. And
Yeah.
because they've heard other people say it, and oh, this is what you say in this situation. And
Mm.
so they will just mirror that.
Mm. But if you've heard something that's not helpful, that's not very good, is it?
Yeah, how many times do we tell someone when they say something like that, like, well, not maybe not to bugger off, but to just say, thank you, but I'm not interested? We don't,
Yeah.
rarely.
Yeah.
And unless we have the words. So words are so important. Body language is so important. Probably body language is more important than the words that we use. And so this is one of the things that we train our volunteers with in Social Health Australia.
And you've talked about the essential role and learning the skill of shut upness, which I do love. If someone is going to ask or see someone who's being diagnosed with a terminal illness or who is dying, what would you recommend that visitor does or says? Perhaps things to avoid, just based on your personal experience. Obviously, it's anecdotal, but
So I'm just thinking of all the situations I can use as an example.
I know
Yeah,
quite the question I've asked.
it's good for my brain. That's okay. I'm thinking of this man. He was nearing end of life. He had this friend who would come in and sit there, and rather than just companioning, being by their side, they felt they had to fill up the space with words. And the words that they thought would be helpful was telling this man, oh, you should do this, and I read about this, and have you done this? And it became really exhausting. So then I asked permission of the man if I could speak to his friend to let him know how his words were reacting with his friend, because this was an old friend and he adored him.
Mm,
And I was given permission, because permission is a very big thing. Always have to ask permission. Can I do this? Can I say that? And then I spoke to his friend, and I was a little bit nervous. I didn't know. I mean, I'm a stranger to this person, and here I am telling him what he could do. And he got it. And he said, I just didn't mean it like that. Because then the good thing I always say, have you ever had anyone said to you what you should do? And I didn't have to say anything else, because I could
mm.
tell by the look on their face, yeah, they got the point. And how many of us have been through that ourselves? Yet somehow some of us just slip into it because we don't know the alternative, which is why, we talk about death literacy. So it's how to talk about it leading up to someone's end of life, after, when we're with their people. And there are certain things that some people say, so many, I'm sure, and your listeners would know. Oh, now they're with God. And okay, now if that person was not religious, they would get annoyed with that. Or now they're in a better place. Now they are in. I can't think of all of the things right now that people say that are really inappropriate.
Oh, at least they had a good life.
Yes, that's
At
right.
least they lived a long time.
Yes.
Oh, at least you've got another child.
Oh my gosh, yes, that's right. That was one of the things. So I was training these Vietnamese women to be pastoral carers. And so one of the conversations, and thank you for raising that, because I know that that was something that I wanted to talk about too. And so I would say, in a situation, so the mother and the father, their baby has died, what would you say? And straight away, they both said what you said. Well, at least you have another child, or you're young and you'll have another one. So then all I didn't say, no, wrong. I just said, okay, now imagine that your baby has died. You're in the room with your husband and you're holding your dead baby in your arms. And then someone says to you, well, at least you have another child. Or you're young enough, you can have another child. How would you feel? That's all I had to say. They got it. So then we started talking about what else can you say? And so they were coming from their cultural background. This is what you would say. And so I just had to question that and to just put it to them, well, how do you feel about that? Now you're in their shoes.
And is that advice that perhaps other people should take on board? Maybe just for a moment before speaking, perhaps just put yourself in another person's shoes, another person's situation, and think whether they would like to actually hear the same advice that you're about to give. Is that perhaps a good filter?
Yes, I think that's great. But I wouldn't use the word should, I would say can. This is what they can do.
Yeah.
I go when I hear the word should.
No, that's really good, because again it brings us back to things that we need to be aware of, that
Yeah.
just we fall back into old habits when we're having these discussions.
Yes, yes. I think that put yourself in that position. How does it feel for you? Because then I will understand how far they can go. If this person does not have the ability to have insight, that means I will need to use another trick to get them to see, to have some insight into their actions and how it can affect another person.
And that's a good segue, I would say, into your role as a team leader with Social Health Australia, and that role of training people in certain circumstances. But it's not really the only time that you've been in that capacity as an instructor or trainer. So I've just got a list here of different things that you've done, Annie, such as the meditation instructor at Moorabbin Oncology. You've also spoken at Stirling College and Monash Palliative Care about the Buddhist patient. That's a term I haven't heard before. The Buddhist patient, what is unique about a Buddhist patient? And can you just explain that a little bit for us, please?
As I said, in Buddhism, death is our greatest teacher because it reminds us that we will all die, that we are finite creatures, and that when we die, one of the most important things is for our mind to be in as peaceful a state as possible, for us to be as calm as possible, if possible, of course. Then we would use the meditation. Sometimes it depends on the individual. A death meditation can be very beneficial or not. It depends on the individual. After someone dies, I'm going to be going a little bit backwards and forwards here.
Sure.
Usually when a Buddhist dies, a very common request is to have no one to touch them at the time of death. In particular around the feet, if it can be avoided. Because at the time of death, according to Buddhism, to not touch the body, to have as little interference as possible so that the consciousness can leave through the consciousness is said to leave through the top of the head. So we will ask that their feet are not touched. And that's basically a very, very simple description of a Buddhist patient. Plus, there will be certain dietary things. There will be certain chants and music and prayers that they will want. With the people, just because they're Buddhists doesn't necessarily mean that they are all conversant with the stages of dying according to Buddhism. One of the beautiful things about the stages of dying in Buddhism, it's very similar to palliative care, and palliative care nurse and doctor can also recognize that. So we go by the four elements in the body. So when the earth element is the first one to leave the body, and that's the weight of the body. We feel a weakness. We cannot lift our heads. We cannot talk. We cannot lift our arm. We just sink into the mattress. That's the earth element leaving. And then it moves over to it could be the water element, or perhaps it could be the heat element, the fire element. They can be interchangeable. And so if it is the water element, the person will start feeling very thirsty. The blood and their urine and all of the fluids in the body all stop working as they did when all of the organs were functioning. Now the organs are shutting down. So the water element that's the dryness of the mouth. And obviously, usually when someone is dying, their mouth is quite open because they have that oxygen hunger. And and I explain that to the people. Then it will be the heat of the body. And as I said, the heat of the blood, the heart pumping. And when that leaves, and then the last element is the element of air, our last exhalation. And so often I will say to people, so this is the full circle. When you were born, you had your first inhalation. And now you are dying, you will have your final exhalation. And that helps them to understand. Now, some Buddhists do feel comfortable with reincarnation. Not all do, which is why I say that if we can do everything in our power, that they have peace of mind, that peace of mind will then lead them to a beneficial reincarnation. So we don't want people arguing in the room. We don't want people crying out loud or begging them, don't die, don't die. You cry, of course we can't help that. But and no family conflict, because that's the last thing that a dying person needs.
Because it's correct in my understanding that hearing is the last sense to go.
Hearing is the last sense to go, yes. So I encourage people to speak to them even when they are unconscious, even after they have died. And when they have died, then I will say a particular saying, and I will say this to people who are Buddhist or not Buddhist. Can I read it out now?
Yes, please, Annie.
Okay, so I will call this person Jane. All right, Jane. Dearest Jane, you have now died. You are no longer in your physical body. This is right. This is as it should be. Please allow your soul to be guided towards your next stage on this beautiful journey. Your life was lived well. Well, now no more of the countless gems that you held close to you. Now no more of the times that were difficult. This time has now ended. Please follow the direction of your soul, your spirit. Many hearts full of love send their limitless wishes for you, dear Jane. Go in peace. Go in trust that all will be well. Your stories remain on earth and in the hearts of those who continue to love you. Have no fear at this time. You are now part of the endless tune of all mortal beings. Rest. Now, sometimes, if the people are interested, I will say that we can hold our hands close to our hearts and to visualize that heartfelt love being directed to our hands. And then we place our hands on the person and we send compassion and care from our hands to their now deceased body. And then we can begin the washing, if that's what's wanted.
That's beautiful, Annie. Now tell me, you just mentioned previously about the fact that some people aren't comfortable with a reincarnation. Can you talk me through why that may be? Sorry, that is my cat falling over things on my desk. But yeah, I'd be intrigued to hear about why some people who are Buddhist may not be comfortable with reincarnation.
Well, Buddhism has many different faces. And even though as a Buddhist we're usually very comfortable with the concept of reincarnation, some people, they will call themselves a Buddhist, but there are certain things that they do not follow, that they do not agree with, and that's fine. There's no rigid rules. Well, you can't call yourself a Buddhist now because you don't believe in that. Everyone will come to it with a different value, and that value system is what will color their actions.
Okay, so that's good in me sort of understanding, like that I was brought up in the Catholic faith, and it's not a faith that I have practiced in since I was very young. But the fact that, to belong to, my understanding of belonging to the Catholic faith is adhering to all doctrines. Whereas for something with what you're saying with Buddhism is that's very individualistic in how you adhere to it, I suppose. Would that be correct?
Absolutely. The most important thing is that we cause no harm, that we are compassionate. And if someone we don't like, perhaps they've done bad things, we do not turn our resentment onto them. So we accept full responsibility ourselves. If we cannot help someone, then do not hurt them, do not harm them, at least. So you don't have to believe in reincarnation. You don't have to do all of the rituals and the ceremonies and things like that. The most important thing is that you're a good person. And that good person can, once again, this is the translation of what a good person means. So even some Buddhists who are culturally Buddhist are not really clear on a lot of the teachings because they've been raised or generational, but perhaps they've never really questioned it. So sometimes people who have converted or have adopted Buddhism, because they usually end up getting really into it a bit more seriously, it's not uncommon that they can often understand a bit more about it. But I'm not saying that's across the board, obviously.
No, it sounds like it's well, I suppose like any religion, or it's something that's very individual.
It is, exactly. Yes, yes.
Now, tell me, Annie, what would you say if you could provide, advice to anyone in relation to if they're looking at a terminal illness or supporting someone with a terminal illness? Do you have any advice that we haven't mentioned already?
I would always encourage people, or just usually to start talking about an advanced care directive. And this advanced care directive, whether or not it's put into place, at least that person can get their wishes heard by the people that are important to them.
And Annie, can you take me through just the steps? What is involved in an advanced care directive, just so there's no confusion about what that document is?
Sure. An advanced care direction or advanced care plan, it is only put into action when the person is unable to speak for themselves. So this is something that I always remind people. This is only when you're unable to direct what you want. It's in writing, so your wishes will be followed. So an advanced care directive comes in two sections. One is the instructional, and this is the legal document that has to be signed by the doctor and witnessed. And then the other one is, oh, this is embarrassing. So I've gone and forgotten what it was. So anyway, but the values. It's about
There you
the
go, values.
values. God. And the values is also very important because this is an opportunity to put down the things that are important to you. In mine, I've got simple things like I'm a Buddhist. These are the things that I would want. I would want time for meditation. I would want time to listen to my prayers. I don't eat broccoli. I don't drink milk. I don't have a pillow. So if anyone put a pillow under my head, I'd be throwing it on the ground. And I have been in hospital a few times, and they put the pillow straight under my head. And I said that I don't want, but then a different nurse comes in, and they think that they're doing the right thing, and no problem with that. Then also that I love touch. I love foot massage, hand massage, leg, my back, beautiful things. For me, dental hygiene, my body hygiene is so important. So, and also cream on my skin after a wash and daily, things like that, very important for me. I like to listen to certain music. I like to have certain teachings. Also, there are some people that I don't want beside me when I'm dying. There are certain people, absolutely, that I want you. There are definitely some people that I don't want. These are the should people, and I have a pretty good idea I would know what they would be saying to me. But when you're dying, you don't really have much control. You can't tell someone to bugger off. Although some can, I have had that.
And for the people who are supporting that person and surrounding that person, towards end of life, what is some advice for them besides perhaps practicing shut upness?
We don't get a dress rehearsal to die. So the person who is facing end of life will be not uncommon for them to feel scared. They've never done this before. They don't know what's going to happen. It's not advisable to say, just relax, just calm down, because from my experience, that doesn't really work. You need a bit more than that. Oh, really? Can you tell me how to relax? I'm sort of, now my breathing is getting lesser and lesser. I can feel my body changing, and it's really hard for me to calm down. So I would encourage people to not say things like that. Just be with that person. You don't have to fill up the space with words, just a gentle touch. Maybe to put some music on that you know that they like. Keep it really simple. Have your friends around there, sitting with them. But if they want to talk about old times, if they want to talk about the stories, the shared stories, good, bad, or otherwise, it's when someone is dying, they develop a lean sense of expression, and they have excellent bullshit detectors. So if someone comes in and they start wafting on about something, that person is not interested. And I've heard this so many times. So just be real, be vulnerable, be humble, because you're going to die too. So you might as well get something from this experience. Maybe you could use it in your own advanced care directive. Well, like I had this experience, and that's something that I don't want, so I'm going to put that in my advanced care directive. Or at least I'm going to be able to speak to people about it. This is what I do not want. Some people find it really difficult to think of things that they do want, but they don't seem to have much trouble in figuring out what they don't want.
And maybe is that a good place for people to start if they don't know?
Yeah, exactly. I mean, how many of us contemplate that time when we will have no control over our body and the circumstances and the outcome? It's a bit alien, isn't it?
Yeah. And if it's also hard to think about that really personal time of death, maybe people could think about something a little bit more removed, and the funeral service. What did they like, or what didn't they like at a funeral service that they attended? And then perhaps, become a little bit more intimate with detail from there on in.
Well, I know as soon as I usually see the person, and usually, the first time that I meet them, I will ask, do you want, first of all, we agree on the language. And I said, are you okay if I say death and dying? And I've never had anyone say no. I said, because then they pass, or when you're gone, or something like this. And I said, we both need to be on the same page. So if I say something, we both know what I mean. And if you say something, we both know what you mean. So then I will ask them, have they decided if they want to be cremated or buried? It's not unusual that they have never had this conversation.
Yeah.
And their people, sometimes I will ask them, does so-and-so want to be cremated or buried? Well, we've never had that talk. And I've seen some really unfortunate situations when the person has died and their people, they don't know what they wanted because it was never spoken. We don't know what mom or dad or my brother or my sister, we don't know what they wanted. So they've got to try and think of what that person would have wanted, and they feel, well, what if it's not what they wanted? So this is why speaking about it is so important. Funerals, we can have so many different kinds of funerals. Now, Beck Lyons was great when you gave that interview just recently, because she is a master of home funerals, and a beautiful, beautiful woman. And I have seen many beautiful home funerals, and even hybrid, that the body can come home from the nursing home, from palliative care, from the coroners, and they can come home to have a vigil, so that all the important people to that person come around. And maybe they sleep in the same room with them. Maybe they have a party around them. Whatever that person would have liked, then they could do that around them. And also, there's the benefit of a living funeral, a living wake. Now, I've been involved in a couple of these, and they have been so precious that Sarah and I went to this lady's one. She had, because I suggested to her a living wake, and she loved the idea. Oh, that was something that she could get into, and her friends, And she had the most beautiful one, a 5-star one. And then this other lady, an elderly lady, and she had just a really casual one, but they were both beautiful. It's inviting people to come and to share their stories with the person who is going to die. And then everyone interconnecting and understanding this, the warp and weft of all these stories, how we all came to be here.
Yeah. Because I think as we get older, I'm in my mid-40s now, and really we're at the stage now where my son's about to have his 21st, but other than that, it's what, 50th would be the next big celebration. But I loved when I interviewed Zenith Virago recently that she makes sure that every single birthday is a celebration and gets everyone together, because I think that we don't get our people together often enough and have fun, and we don't make those connections of how you all knew each other. And my husband recently gave a talk, and it was really beautiful to actually be in the room where I could see his, people that he went to, VCA with, and then our old neighbours from St Kilda, and then his aunt and cousins, and that was really beautiful. So I could only imagine how much more powerful that would be when you are terminal and you know that you're dying, to actually connect those people together.
Yes. Some people think, oh, it sounds like it's a bit like it's all about me. And I go, no, because it's about them. How often do we tell our friends and acquaintances, you actually mean a lot to me, and that you're really precious, and I'm so glad that I'm in your life and that you're in my life. And one of the things that you mentioned about your child, have you spoken to your child? So they're only 20, 21. What would they want if they had died? Would they want to donate their organs? Would they want a cremation or a burial? What would they want? It's challenging, isn't it, to have that conversation with your young child, 20 years old, still a young child.
Yes, I think he'd prefer conversations about death rather than sex with his mother. But no, look, we've always had very, very open conversations about any topic. And Ethan, he travelled overseas last year to work, and we made sure as soon as he was 18 that he had a will in place and a power of attorney. So if he was overseas, we could provide him with financial support and access, and could do anything that he needed on to be done on his behalf while he was over there. But he has a will, and I've had a will since the age of 18. That was how I was raised. But I'm realizing I am the exception, not the standard.
Yes, you are the exception. You are. And also, one of the things is that when someone is heading towards their dying time, how many times do all of these people come out of the woodwork when the person is maybe got a week to live? They're so weak and debilitated on drugs, and all these people start coming in, saying goodbye and sitting with them. And many times, not all the time, many times that person has said to me afterwards, why do they come now? I haven't seen them for months. Why didn't they come when I was able to hold a conversation? Why now, when they're just weak and all they can do is manage a little grin? Have you ever had anything like that, Catherine?
Yeah, I have, and I'd even take it a step further to the point where, for us, and this is the whole catalyst of why I've done the podcast and the business. And we had 3 friends die last year, and my husband's best friend being the most significant of that. But then again, this year we had someone who was a close friend. We haven't seen him for a few years. We got a phone call. Rod got a phone call out of the blue to say that he had been found dead in his house because no one had heard from him for a while, and he's now at the coroner. But it's not also waiting for people to be terminal. It's just reaching out to people at any stage and
Yes.
making sure that because we assume that they're just going about their normal everyday life like they always are. And then it's a real shock when you find out that that's not the case, that someone has died and they're no longer just doing what you expect them to be doing.
It's well said that they're not doing what you expect them to be doing. Yes. And we
you
do
know
expect that. We like to compartmentalize. Okay, well, they're over there, they're doing this, and I'm doing this, and I'm busy, and things like that. And then all of a sudden you find that out. And then, did you ever question yourself that, oh, I wish we'd gone and visited them more?
Yeah, look, I did to a degree. The relationship was sort of more sitting with my husband, and we were maybe closer at another period of time in his life. But yeah, I recently text everyone in my phone who I've got in my phone and let them know what I was doing, and said, look, I'd love for you to still be in contact with me. Give me a call sometime or something like that. And I'm really happy I've done that, because you never know what other people might be doing at the other end. They may not be living the life that you think that they were living.
Exactly. Sometimes you may not even find out because not everyone is going to let you know, because maybe they're not comfortable because that's the kind of life that I'm living. I don't want anyone to know about that.
Yeah. Yeah. And also, like, since starting the business, that, I had an old colleague reach out to me who had been diagnosed as being terminal, and she asked for support. And you just can never assume that how someone is going on the other side.
So, how do you think someone would be able to find out?
I think staying in contact, and it doesn't have to be a milestone occasion or anything along that line. And you know how sometimes you get busy with life and kids and all the rest of it, and you lose touch. But I don't think that there should be shame associated with that. I think that just bloody reach out, and because it's so much better that you actually did do that. And I've actually only 2 weeks ago had dinner with a girlfriend who we both ended up having children at the same time. 20 years later, we're back having dinner again, and I'm so happy that we did, because you remind yourself about I suppose, part of your life as well, and a part of you, of that who you were, what ignited in you that you love about that person. So I think that it's a bit of rediscovering yourself as well, you know. So
Yeah,
I think that that's good to reach out.
yeah, I think it is. Yeah, to rediscover. That's right. I like that.
And Annie, have you got any other thoughts that you'd like to share with our listeners?
Well, for the other death doulas, and also for anyone who's interested, to ask the death doula, do they work with another death doula? So, from my experience, if you've got two, three, or four people that you're with, and perhaps some of them start their decline at a similar time, you really need, this is from my own experience, to have another death doula, similar minded, that you can both help one another. Now, I think on the weekend you met Barb Ferguson.
Yes, yes. The other weekend
Yes.
with Denise Love's workshop.
So Barb and I worked together as a bit of a tag team. So after I've had three spine operations, so after my last one, I can no longer do the washing of the body and the dressing of the body. So Barb will do that. Also, sometimes, I can't get there at a certain time, so I will ask Barb and she will cover for me. Or if she can't do it, then I will cover for her. So then there is that, I think it's really important to have that seamless transfer from one person to the other. So we will meet people sometimes together. A couple of weeks ago, we both met this woman together with her daughter, and so Barb would say her thing, I would say my thing about what the woman was speaking about, and they could feel comfortable that they're going to be held. They're going to be held in. I've always been a bit suspicious about this word love, but they are going to be held in love because they're going to be safe. They're going to be so respected. So to have a one or two that you work with is really good. Highly recommend that. Get your advanced care directive, even if it's a bit daunting when people start it, but just to start opening up the conversations once a week, once a month, have a round table with your friends, your family, your neighbors, and say, okay, and this is when you'll usually find out about the things that went pear-shaped in other people's lives. It'd be really good to go, oh yeah, I can relate to that. I don't want that either, so I'm going to write that down. I have prepared for my own death. So when you come in the front door, on the right-hand side, I've got for medical emergency and A4. And then I've got my advanced care directive. I've got my body donor, form. And I've also written a letter for the body donor when they take my body, if I am accepted. And it's got my will, it's got all my animals, it's got the people to contact. If this happens, contact that person. It's got my executors, everything is there. Doesn't look pretty, I must admit, for interior decorator, but it's very functional. I've seen it
And
many times.
and very important.
Very important. So many times. But yes, I've got an advanced care directive. It's rolled up in the freezer, and I said, I don't think that's a good place for it.
No, no, not at all.
Which is why
Um,
Lisa, who wrote the bottom drawer book, that's why she called it the bottom drawer book. Most of all our really important information is in that bottom drawer. Get it out. Bring it out to the open.
yeah, totally, exactly. And that's the whole concept of sort of the app that I'm working on, is just to get it out, document it, and to share it with loved ones, so we're all aware and we don't get caught in the situation we were last year. And just on that, Annie, I just noted that, what was in that pile of papers then was a letter to your body donor.
Yes.
You can't just drop that and then not explain that.
My mum actually donated her body. And when they had the memorial at Melbourne University, I saw these young medical students standing up, and most of them said this was the first time that I had actually seen a dead body. And
Wow.
and I'm so grateful that this person gave me permission to use their body for medical science. And I'm thinking, how can it be that a young adult, so many of them have never seen a dead person before. So I wanted to let them know a bit about me. So I wrote this letter, and I hope that it will go with it's instructed. They will have to take it with my body.
Oh, that's great.
And so that they will read it. And I've been very open in it and very vulnerable. And I was very honest. This is the life that I have led. And now I offer my body to you, and may it serve some purpose, so then that I can still benefit others from my death.
Oh, Annie, do you mind if I get a copy of that letter and pop it in the show notes so our listeners can perhaps have a read?
Please, please.
Oh, that'd be lovely. Annie, I can't thank you enough for your time today. It's been an absolute pleasure.
Thank you, Catherine, and lovely to meet Bandit.
Don't be caught dead forgetting to subscribe. And here are some more videos we know you'll love.